views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we encourage you to like and share them on Facebook because it's time for the Sue Ellen Sanders Show with Sue Ellen Sanders.
Welcome to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. We're glad you're here, and I have with me today the Chief Communications Officer with New Horizons of the Treasure Coast. And Lisa Reimer is here to talk about some special events you have coming up. Some are annual events. And we're going to talk about the programs that New Horizons also offers the community. And we'll also talk a little bit about the state of people's mental health today. And how do you know when you need help? And how do you know what kind of help you need? So, Lisa, so glad you're here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, to begin with, New Horizons of the Treasure Coast obviously covers the entire Treasure Coast.
And Okeechobee. So
and Okeechobee as well.
We are New Horizons of the Treasure Coast and Okeechobee, although, Okeechobee was added later.
Okay. So that means in those four counties, people who need your assistance get your assistance. And what type of general help do you offer?
So New Horizons is the most comprehensive mental health and substance abuse agency in this region. We have 9 offices across 4 counties, and we serve 14,000 children and adults annually, regardless of their ability to pay. So no one, because we're a 501c3, no one is turned away due to lack of financial resources, which is pretty rare. So we provide outpatient services at 8 offices. We have 2 offices in Vero. We have 3 outpatient offices in St. Lucie County, and then our main campus on Midway Road, which not only has outpatient offices, but it has 98 inpatient beds where we house children in crisis, adults in crisis, a detox unit for adults, and a 28-day substance abuse treatment program for adults, as well as a group home for adults.
A lot of programs are specific to the reason somebody is suffering from any type of mental health need. But New Horizons really covers the gamut of all of them. You cover substance abuse, you cover children, you cover adults, you cover things that are both chronic and specific to, a time that someone's going through their life. How do you know at what point do you know that somebody needs help beyond, go out and run a mile, it'll make you feel better?
Well, so that is up to individuals. The biggest obstacle from getting the help you need is stigma. Mental health or mental illness, carries with it stigma. Even suicides, it's the second leading cause of death in 10 to 34-year-olds in this country, which equates to about 44,000 suicides a year in this country. That's the same amount of deaths as if there were a major commercial airline crash every single day of the year. Now, if we were having a major airplane crash every day, we would definitely do something, change the system. We would, look at, how we, our standards, our expectations, how we, that industry is utilized, and we don't do that. We don't even talk about the suicide. So you'll see like a celebrity death by suicide, and then you'll have a little bit of conversation, and then everything sort of falls by the wayside. So stigma, and it's because of stigma. It wasn't too long ago, actually, when, suicide was considered a taboo subject. Cemeteries, certain religions wouldn't even allow you to be buried in their cemetery. It was considered such a sin.
Well, generally in the news media too, they don't cover suicides or call it a suicide because they don't
Want to exploit the families and the
yeah.
victims. Correct. So it's not, but it doesn't have to be an exploitive kind of coverage, which actually it is kind of exploitive. I mean, when you put that someone overdosed or they died by suicide, if they're a celebrity and that sells papers, people want to read it. So there's ways. In fact, if you're in the media and you Googled just ways of reporting suicide, it would talk about the non-sensational ways of doing that, so that you're imparting real information, such as QPR, which is considered to be the CPR of mental health. It's called question, persuade, and refer. And this is one of the things that as a member of the Zero Suicide Initiative, which is a national campaign to reduce the numbers of suicides, and so New Horizons is part of that campaign. So one of the things that we do is we go out into the public and teach QPR. So that means, put down your phone or look up from your screen when you ask someone, "How are you?" so that you actually see their eyes. You're making eye contact. And so when they just say that fine, that's an acronym for something else, when they say fine, that you can see if they're actually fine or not. Sometimes it's so obvious. There are telltale signs. You see someone who's, uncharacteristically happy, or someone who's uncharacteristically sad.
But the main thing to look for is
the signs.
Uncharacteristic.
Right, uncharacteristically,
yes, so it's
right.
A
or
change.
If you know that
change,
they've
yeah.
just had some incredible loss in their life, a
Yes.
death in the family, those kinds of things, you may want to, pursue a line of questioning. And if they don't seem like they're okay, to have the really tough, to ask the really tough question, which is, are you thinking of killing yourself? I mean, nobody wants to ask that. People feel uncomfortable asking that.
Yeah,
but
I can't imagine opening.
Well, you don't open with that conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, getting to the point where you ask that question, it would be a very difficult question to ask. No matter, actually, probably harder to ask the closer you are to that person. But it's interesting that you bring up the QPR and the looking at people and seeing what's going on in their life, because one of the things that when my daughter first went away to college 6 years ago, there were a couple incidents in the media about college freshmen who were away from home for the first time, and their parents couldn't see them, and they were around people who didn't know the way they usually were. And one of them was a college athlete. It was in the news, and she wasn't doing as well in her sport as she thought that she should be, and she jumped off a building. And her parents had no idea. And the people that she was away at the school with, they didn't know what she was usually like. They didn't know that she'd been more withdrawn, that she had changed. They didn't know that the fact that she wasn't doing as well in her sport was so important to her. It was the end-all, be-all for her. And so I went through a paranoia with my daughter away at college, where I couldn't see her on a regular basis, where I'd say, send me a picture. Because I'd talk to her on the phone, and I'd be all listening to, does her voice sound different? Does she sound happy? Because if I say, are you happy? She's going to say, yes, I'm happy. And a lot of us have family, not just going away to school, although this is the time of year that the kids are leaving, but maybe elderly parents that you don't get to see every day, or friends or family, and you don't see them, and so you don't know. How do you deal with that when you're not seeing their face on a regular basis, but you suspect that things haven't been going well for them? What do you do?
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
No, I think that that the people who are in your environment, we each need to be more invested in each other's lives. None of us are an island. And they do say that most people who die by suicide leave a lot of signs.
When you go back and look,
Yeah, and it turns out that they may only say one thing to you, but if you go around, they're saying little things to everyone, just like little dropping hints. Some of those hints could be, like the world would be better off without me, or, I'm, such a disappointment, or perhaps they start giving away their possessions. They, like I said earlier, they could become, just ecstatically joyful because they've made a decision and they're at peace with that, or they may become very depressed, because, we do need to ask each other about our state of being. And then if you do recognize the signs, then have someone to call, and so we keep putting out, we have the 211 number, and then there's the 1-800, the national, oh my gosh, and I think it's 273-8475. It's,
the
song
national,
now.
Yeah.
Which is a good
National
thing to have
hotline,
a song, right?
yes.
So that's the national suicide hotline. And then on the Treasure Coast and in Okeechobee, you can call New Horizons 772-468-3909. So to have those numbers, available. So 211 is just a really simple one to call.
Yeah.
And they would access New Horizons if they needed our assistance. I mean, we all work in partnership. And, stay with the person. So it's called QPR. So question how they're doing. If they say, yes, I have been thinking of hurting myself, or then you ask them, do you have the means to do that? Do you have the gun? If they say, yeah, I thought about shooting myself, you ask them if they have the means, and then if they do, then you try to, say, can you give that to me? Or you make that call, and then you tell the professional that they said that they had the means, and you stay with the person until help arrives. So question, persuade them to get help, and then refer them to the help that they need and stay with them. So that's sort of how it goes.
And along those lines too, as today's climate has changed as far as being techie and media aware, and our kids in the schools are having some issues with, possibly people being bullied. And then that's another thing that you see in the headlines too. You see the kids who have been bullied, and other kids actually might even say, hey, you ought to just go kill yourself. And then the kids go home and they tell their parents, and the parents say, don't worry about it. Because a lot of times, too often, I would say that the parents don't want their kid being identified with that stigma of having a mental health issue, whether it's created by a bullying type situation or whether they're stressed out. You see the kids in that, I talked about kids going away to college, but also kids who are getting ready to go to college, or that are very concerned about their grades, that are stressed, or when they're making a transition. Are there times in life where people are more prone to suicide? You said 10 to 34. Is that what you?
Yes, and then so 10 to 34, the leading cause of death amongst 10 to 24-year-olds is accidents. So, and then the second leading cause is suicide. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a big one. And then we
it
have,
just makes
of course,
the hair
and
on the back of my neck
across the board, it's within the top 10 leading causes of death, so even in the older age groups, we're seeing more and more suicides amongst seniors, who are making decisions that they don't have the means to support their lives, to sustain their lives and their medical bills, et cetera, and just they'd be better off, gone. And of course, our veterans, we see about 20 suicides a day amongst the veterans. So, but, to have a discussion of mental health at this point without talking about childhood trauma is, in my opinion, irresponsible. And it's a difficult pill to swallow, but I have to say this, that in the 90s, from 95 to 97, the biggest study was done by Kaiser Permanente, which is a large health insurer, and the Department of CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Yeah.
So they followed for 2 years 17,000 members of Kaiser Permanente, and now these were for the most part, Caucasian, educated, young people. So it's not like we are looking at minorities or the greatly impoverished. We're looking at sort of the high end middle class, and they found that there were direct correlations between experiencing adverse childhood experiences. So there are direct correlations between adverse childhood experiences and the 5 leading diseases in this country, which are lung disease, heart disease, liver disease, cancer, I think diabetes, and then suicide. So a direct correlation between experiencing adverse childhood experiences and dying by the 5 major diseases or suicide. So what we do, this is called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experience Study, and it's become a questionnaire that many mental health agencies, including us, as well as other human services agencies, give to their clients. And there's only really 10 questions, and there are variations, of course, on the questionnaire. But the questions ask: have you ever been sexually abused before the age of 18? Have you ever been physically abused before the age of 18? Were you mentally abused, humiliated, belittled, denigrated before the age of 18? Was there any insecurity about food in your household? Was there insecurity about shelter in the household? Was there divorce in the household? Did anyone die by suicide in the house? Were there addicts in the house? So there are 10 questions, and what they found was that anyone who answered 4 yeses actually were so exponentially more
just
likely.
4 out of 10?
Just 4 out of 10.
Wow.
But just think.
Yeah.
So how pervasive divorce is. So,
Yes.
50% of all first divorces end in suicide. End in divorce.
Yeah.
50% of all
marriages ended in divorce. Yeah.
Second, marriages, something like 64%, and third marriages, 78% end in divorce. So that's how pervasive divorce is. So here, most kids would say yes to divorce, and then you have 3 more. So, and what they realized is that, if you have these number of, or a very chronic or very severe case of adverse childhood experiences, that it impacts neurological development, which of course impedes learning in school. The kids who have these adverse childhood experiences go on to participate in more risky behaviors such as alcohol and drug use and promiscuous sex.
And then it all builds.
Which blows up to full-blown addiction. Yeah. And then they end up with heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, cancer, or liver disease, or they die by suicide. In fact, people who have experienced mental illness die on average 28 years before the general population, and that's all together with those figures. So there is this sort of, Florida is the very least funded state in the country.
Why
We're
is that?
always 49th or 50th in mental health funding.
It's just not prioritized.
It's not a priority, and you talk to specific politicians, and this isn't unusual, and they say, I had a hard time growing up, and I pulled myself up by the bootstraps and, made something of my life. Well, that's terrific, but you can't judge someone else's trauma by your experiences. In fact, even in the same family, People who have very similar experiences growing up can manifest their trauma
Differently, yeah.
So, and also, there's a lot of trauma that kids don't tell their parents about or their siblings about. If you're sexually abused, that may be something that you just keep quiet for your life until you can't keep quiet
but
about it
you feel
anymore.
worse and worse about yourself. You talked about a little bit about people saying, oh, they need to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but you also do see in the school system, you see a lot of parents who don't want their children identified as having any type of mental illness at all, minor or receiving any type of services, because they don't want them to be different from everybody else. And
there's also cultural biases to that. I mean, in certain communities, where you have men are expected to be strong and not cry or things like that, then where's the room for someone to actually ask for help? If you're supposed to always be the strong one, where is the place for asking for help?
And you talk about the stigma, and I want to tell you a story. I'm not going to identify, obviously, any of the students by name, but the students in my class at a past school had to identify a need in the community and give a speech about it. And some people, talked about, environmental needs. Some people talked about curing cancer and alcoholism. And then there was one student who talked about the need for mental health, and it was wonderfully done. She had all her statistics there, and then she had personal experience that she had added into it. Well, nobody blinked. Nobody thought anything about the kids who were telling the story about their mom who had cancer. But this girl was giving personal references, and you could hear the whispers in the room that it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's telling us this. And that's the kind of world we live in, where even though it's a disease that's equal in severity to the other identified diseases, it carries the stigma where perhaps the sufferer is hiding it, their loved ones are hiding that their daughter or son might have it, and they don't want to be identified as having it because of the stigma, and so they don't get the treatment. Whereas if they had something like cancer or heart disease or something like that, it would be like, oh, let's do a GoFundMe for them because, they have this and we can help them with it.
Right.
So what can we do to make it better? What can we do?
Well, we do things like, come on the radio and talk about mental health, and that's what we should be having, open conversations about that, and having more mental health services available and accessible. I mean, for instance, we have not 57% of New Horizons clients are indigent. That means that they have no source of income or insurance, and yet we serve them anyway. But there has not been an increase in service costs, so what we get reimbursed by the state, so it's a portion of that because they that is how, and that's a complicated, but we get reimbursed a portion of that, but not the whole thing.
And that's why you do fundraisers.
And we don't, right? And we have not had an increase in service costs for 24 years from the state. So they're paying for the same service, the same amount as they were 24 years ago. So, I mean, we know inflation is more than our annual raises. Yes. If you get a 2% raise, they say inflation is like 2.5%. And that doesn't even take into account gas and groceries, which makes it more like 10 or 11%. So.
So it creates a situation where a place like New Horizons that represents so many people in 4 different counties and offers services at, you said 57% are indigent, and we don't know if they're indigent because they have mental health needs, or if they just were indigent anyhow, but they're in crisis and they need help, and you don't turn them away. So you need to
Right.
find the dollars to serve them somewhere else.
And we do some really wonderful things. Like we go into the woods. We have social workers who go into the woods in our PATH program, and they connect with the homeless, and they try to create a trust. Because if you're homeless, suddenly you don't want some institution saying, "Come on into our mental health agency." So they build trust. They bring them supplies, and then they help link them with the resources for which they're eligible, such as EBT cards, community housing, medication-assisted programs, therapy, so that maybe substance abuse, programs, those kinds of things. So, we do all kinds of things to connect with people who need our services.
Let's talk for a minute about some of the fundraisers you have coming up, so we make sure that we cover it before we run out of time. And then after that, I'd like to also talk about addiction, because that is a large percentage of the services that you do offer. And the question, too, with that is, how do you know when you need the extra help?
Okay, and there was one thing I was trying to think. What were you going to say? So it is cheaper for a county to provide a mental health program than it is to pay for ER visits, arrests, and incarcerations, which a lot of the mentally people who are not getting the mental health services that they need, and they are more prone to being the victims of crime rather than perpetrating crime. Those are kinds of two myths. Like, oh, mental health services are so expensive. Yeah, but what's even more expensive is tying up all of our services with the mentally ill rather than just providing them with the care that they need to begin with.
Yes. And it's the same thing with crime prevention, too. The prevention end of it should be more important, and you should spend at least an equal amount of money on prevention as you do in creating the situation where you're taking care of people after there's already been an issue.
Right.
So let's talk.
So let's start with our first event that's coming up is September 29th. It's the Race for Recovery 5K Run Walk. The race starts at 7:30 a.m. The registration is at 6:30 a.m. at Met Stadium / First Data Field.
And that is such a fun race,
yes,
because not only do you start there and then you end there, you have a lot of teams, you have everybody
breakfast.
Gathers. You do have
It's
breakfast.
only $25.
And everybody gathers in the stadium afterwards.
Well, we don't do it in the stadium anymore, so it was just
you don't.
it was just too much going in the gate. So it's all outside the stadium, and we have a DJ. We have breakfast. Everybody gets a medal for participating. We have prizes for the top 3 in each category. We have a stroller. We have a 1-mile walk loop, and then the 3-mile, just all on one block, no crossing the streets.
So it's not just a race, it's a party.
Yeah, it's a party. And this year, Deb Pismenti is going to do a yoga warm down. And we inevitably have some line dancing, and it's a lot of fun. And it's very short. It's like, get your exercise in, have some fun, support a good cause, and then get on with your Saturday.
And you can pre-register. Do you have a Facebook event page or something?
Yes,
what's the best place for people?
So you can just go to our website. It's probably the best. It's www.nhtcinc.org. That's New Horizons Treasure Coast Inc.org. You can even spell it out, or you can
Google New Horizons.
Right, you can Google
Google's
New Horizons.
my friend.
Right. So New Horizons in of the Treasure Coast in Okeechobee, because there's a lot of New Horizons. And then you go to our events page, and you can register right there. You can call 772-696-2729. 696-2729, and I'll register you at any time, day or night.
It's also family friendly. You can bring your kids out to
and there's a
this.
stroller division. I mean, you
Oh,
can take the
cool.
strollers
Yeah.
on the walk, and it's a lot of fun. We take pictures, and we have some freebies, and there's some things that you can buy, like t-shirt. Well, you get a t-shirt if you register for the race,
And it's a very cool looking T-shirt.
Uh-huh.
It is. So it's only $25, but if you wait till race day and just come out on race day, then it's $35.
Yes, on race day it's $35. So register now, put a team together. We usually have about 185, 200 people out there. We sing the national anthem. Like I said, we have a DJ. This year it's DJ Ricardo. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
And it starts and ends at Met Stadium, and you can register online on the website. And that's the first thing that's coming up, and that is September 29th. It's a Saturday. The race begins at 7:30, but if you wait till race day to register, you got to be there earlier than that. You can't just cruise in and be there. But it's a fun race. It's not just a race for people who are runners, because there's a lot of walkers, a lot of team interest.
I walk. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm getting ready for it.
Family friendly. And if you're a runner and you're listening to this, you can also find it on active.com, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So that is one thing that's coming up. And then all the money that is raised through this event goes to New Horizons for the programs. Is it for the general fund for the programs?
Well, so
or does it
100% of the money that we raise in fundraisers goes to client services. None of it goes to administrative costs. In fact, we keep our administrative costs at about 7.5%, which is already
That's
very
awesome.
low.
Yeah,
So
that is.
it all goes to client services.
Well, let's talk just a minute too about your executive vice president or president. What is his title?
Our CEO, president, right?
Yeah, John Romano. Because the next event that we're going to be talking about will be honoring him, and John, who has been serving the Treasure Coast as the CEO for New Horizons for 20 years.
Well, he's been with New Horizons for 30 years. And I think, he became, shortly after he came on board, he took on the CEO position. So he is retiring, but it's also our 60th anniversary gala, which we're calling the Diamond Jubilee. I guess that's like, your 50th is your golden anniversary, and
60 is
the diamond anniversary, right?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold that out that long for an anniversary.
And actually, Greg Childress from G. Allen's Fine Jewelry is our committee chair, and just is fitting because he has a jewelry store.
Yes.
So,
yeah, that's absolutely.
So we are promised some very, very, and this is, so the Diamond Jubilee and CEO Retirement Tribute is on November 10th, 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and it's at the Harbor Ridge Yacht and Country Club. And tickets are $150 each, or a table of 10 for $1,200.
And for both these events, you're looking for sponsors too, right?
Yes, we are always looking for sponsors. Yeah.
So people can contact you if you want to be, if your business wants to be a sponsor for either the Race for Recovery or for the 60th anniversary Diamond Jubilee. It's nice that as a nonprofit that you offer different events that are at different ranges, like a $25 race for somebody who just wants to help out and go out, or you have, a Diamond Jubilee that costs quite a bit more for people who want to get dressed up and
our
go out.
agency doesn't usually have the high ticket cost affairs, but this year, because it's our 60th and it's our retirement, we think that maybe we are going to be presenting the inaugural Mental Health Champion Award.
Awesome.
And then from that point on, we may have every 5-10 years have a gala, but have a luncheon every year to present that award.
Right.
And then, in fact, in December, I think it's December 8th, we haven't finalized the date, we have our Breakfast with Santa, which is free for children across the Treasure Coast and in Okeechobee under the age of 18. And we serve all-you-can-eat breakfast. The Mets are our presenting sponsor, and the St. Lucie Mets. And adults can come if they for $5 they can eat, or they just bring a toy for us to give to Toys for Tots, because we work with Toys for Tots at Christmas.
Well, one thing about, we just have a couple more minutes, but one thing I want to point out about New Horizons is that you do have partnerships with many of the different agencies on the Treasure Coast. For example, collecting the toys for Tots, but also for your clients, giving them the information about the services that they need.
We work very closely with Tykes and Teens, helping people succeed, the Children's Council, Children's Services Council, Boys and Girls Club. We have a lot of overlapping in clients. We work with Mustard Seed. They refer people to us. We refer people to them. So there's tremendous partnerships that have across the Treasure Coast. As well right here in St. Lucie County. On our board, Diamond Liddy, the public defender, Catherine Hensley from the school board, Gary Wilson, deputy chief at the sheriff's office, just to name a few.
So you have a lot of synergy going on with just your board, and bringing everybody together. And it'll be nice to see people out for the Race for Recovery on September 29th, and I know that that's a big event for you. You can find out all the information online. Also, the 60th anniversary Diamond Jubilee coming up, also honoring John Romano, and that is going to be November 10th coming up. All the information's on your website.
Yes, and they under the events, so nhtcinc.org. And then go to events.
And we'll have that information. Lisa Reimer's been my guest today, and she is the Chief Communications Officer for New Horizons. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sue Ellen, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. We'll see you back here next week with more.
The Sue Ellen Sanders Show, followed by high school sports Friday nights on WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast.